welcome everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people join today. We call this a Fireside Chat in honor of these times where everything is moving virtually. I have my virtual fire going on in the background. It's a Brooklyn style fire. I just really, first of all, want to thank you all for making space to connect with us and with each other today. We know everybody has a lot on their plates, and we really appreciate everybody who made that space today. Most importantly, to just make space for yourselves, to take care of yourself, because that's very important right now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maria. I am the co-founder of Changing the Conversation with Sini and Rachel, and I am also the vice president of the Diversity and Inclusion practice here at CFW Careers. We will have time for questions at the end, I said that, and we'll move on to the main event. So we are pleased to have Ben Colvin lead this important conversation today. The conversation is titled, "But hey, what about me? Leading while caring for oneself during the times of COVID-19. So what we're hoping that you do today is that you leave the meeting with a set of actionable strategies that can really help you set some parameters to take care of yourself while staying connected with your team and the communities around you. Ben is a certified coach focused on discovering the innate talents of employees and transforming teams through his leadership consulting and coaching practice. Ben's foundation is based on 25 plus years of corporate business as a corporate business executive, and his firsthand experience in building and leading diverse teams, both domestically and globally. Ben's approach focuses on helping clients see their world from different perspectives, and this is the focus of our chat today. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks so much, Maria. It's really an honor to be here and collaborating with you on this.
Thank you. So Ben, the first question we had for you tonight is, what was your aha moment about the topic, hey, but what about me?
Yeah, thanks for that. And, by the way, I think the next time, we've had such a cold spring in the Northeast, right, that the Fireside Chat was really relevant. But hopefully the next time we do this, we'll have it a wine and cheese chat instead, if that makes sense.
I like that.
I have a feeling the chat box is taking off right now, as that is a good idea. But anyway, thanks again. It's really interesting. There were three things that really led me to believe and understand this concept of, hey, what about me? It's through my coaching and consulting practice, and I'll share some of the insights that I got there. But it was also my own experience when I was a leader during 9/11. But also then kind of pulling that all together from what I've been seeing published recently. And on the published side, what I've seen out there is what I call a lot of one-sided advice. And what I mean by that is there's two types of kinds of advice articles out there. One is, oh, here's how you help yourself to feel better and do what you need to do. Or here's how you need to be as a leader for your team. And so often in those, the interdependence of that about how you take care of yourself so that you can be in a place to really show up as that leader for your team, that so much in the advice columns, is really what got me to say, hey, what about me? So that's really kind of the focus of it. When I think about the coaching, one of the things about this COVID-19 crisis is there's so many dimensions to it. And what I've heard from clients, and I coach clients at all different levels, it's really highly personal of how it's impacting them, right? And there's been two overarching themes that I've heard. The first is just general heightened stress and anxiety that this whole thing has created, again, whether it's the health aspects or the like. But the other one is just the realities of what I'm referring to as these blurred boundaries between work and home. And what's contributing to that are the issues around work-life balance. The challenges of also having to be a parent with your kids at home while you're teaching, or even our expectations of our leaders. And sometimes what I'm discovering is sometimes those are real expectations, but sometimes there's the perceived expectations and the worries that can bring, right? There's job insecurity with so many layoffs and furloughs occurring, or even just pay cuts, the health-related concerns. For many people, especially in large cities, they may live by themselves, and so there's isolation, suboptimal work environments. So many people, if they're cohabitating, they may be doing phone calls from their bed, right, or their bedroom, and just adjusting to new work practices. And what's interesting about that, and I've actually seen kind of an ebb and a flow through this. And what I mean by that is initially when this was first happening is almost like when we were in triage. all of my coaching sessions, it was the primary focus was all around the impacts that people were experiencing and those I just described. But then I saw it drop a little bit and people started to get back to a new normal. But now I'm actually seeing it pick up again. Because now we've moved into, it's no longer triage, as one of my clients said, it's long-term care. And what that means is we don't know, we don't have clarity on when this will end. And even when it does end, what will that new normal work look like? What will our work environments look like? We were reading about so many companies who are saying this is happening through 2021. Others are saying we're never going to go back to the way it was. So I've noticed then the issues have been picking up again where once this has been going on. So that was really the first input. On the consulting side, what I was hearing from so many of my clients was that it was really what I'll call the challenge of mind share. It was, or like if the image of Lucy and Charlie Brown when they're playing football, and every time Charlie Brown thought he was getting ready to go kick the football, she'd pick it up and pull it away from him. That's the kind of, what I call uncertainty or constant moving around that's going on. So H&R and learning and development focus has really been on getting enterprise level programs either out to help address this or transition existing programs. On the business side, some of my clients who I consult with just said, I'm just trying to keep the lights on. I'm just trying to keep some basic levels of focus. So while everybody appreciates what I would say that one size doesn't always fit all, and may not always be the most impactful, they have to get to the largest number of employees first. And so that also then starts to limit their mind share to do what they know they need to do and want to do, which is really start to address those individual challenges, or frankly, just take care of their own personal needs. So that's been another contributing factor. And as I mentioned, and empathy is a really critical thing. When I was at 9/11, I had just become a senior leader, and I had just taken on a very large team, and that was the day that 9/11 occurred. And what I would say is I wanted to be empathetic, but I wasn't really sure how to do that in a way that would have an impact for my team members. And so that's really what came up for me is, that at that point we hadn't really even been given a lot of what I'll call training or coaching or concepts around how can you show up as an empathetic leader. So it was really the combination of those that kind of got me to go, but hey, what about me? How can I take care of myself and be the most effective leader that I know I want to be? Now, what I would say too is what's interesting, and there's really one key factor that's really helpful for what I call showing up the way you want to show up. As coaches, we call it mindfulness, or we might call it being present. And those are really enablers to be able to really have the focus and energy to be there for your team, to be there for your family, to really show up to the work that you're doing in a way you want to, and even just for yourself. But the real reality is it's a challenge of time, right? And it's like making the time to do that. But what I've found with my clients is when they do that and they do find that time, and we'll share some examples of how it doesn't have to be this long process, it really has impact, and they really notice it not only for themselves but the people that they're with. So we'll spend some time about that. So that's kind of the whole context of, hey, what about me? Maria, I'd love to hear a little bit about, you wrote a really interesting article recently in this kind of context, and the first part of that was around psychological availability, and there's some parallels there. Can you kind of share your perspectives on this?
Yes, absolutely. So I think playing back on some of the things you just said, one of the things that you identified is that the collective experience right now, it's also highly personal, right? And while we're all going through this pandemic together, it is affecting each of us in a very unique and personal way. And when we think about psychological availability, what psychological availability really relates to is personal circumstances, right? So I can only be available if my personal circumstances are under control. In a work setting, that availability is reflected as an employee's sense of really having the energy and the resources to be there for their team. And I think this is really affecting leaders right now. Leaders are exhausted, they're drained, they're under a lot of pressure. They're not having that psychological availability to support their teams. So what can they do? Well, I think for me, like personally, is really making that space to be fine personally so I can find that psychological availability to be there for others. The way I've been able to do that is through my yoga practice. So I know that I need at least half hour of time to myself to practice yoga each day, sometimes more. But at least I've committed to myself to a bare minimum of a half hour a day of yoga. And that's really helped me process things. I process a lot while I'm practicing yoga. So then I have developed that psychological availability. It also has meant making sure that my family is okay, that my daughter is taken care of with her homeschool, that my husband is okay, that we're healthy, that we have the things we need to get through the day. So I've taken a few minutes every morning to plan for that. I make sure that everything is ready so the day can go smoothly. So I think it's really important to really develop clarity on what works for you because it's such a personal experience. So while for me it's yoga, some people may be thinking, ew, yoga? That's the last thing I want to do. And for them, it might be something different like baking or, I don't know, playing hard rock and moving their head for half hour, whatever works for you. That's what's important here. That's the message, is to have that psychological availability, which is really what allows you to be there for your team. You need to develop personal practices that give you that space. Insightful, but
yeah, that was great.
What I really like to know for you, Ben, is what else do you find as critical to finding that balance? Because everything is so interdependent, right? So how do you show up as a productive leader, but also like develop that inner resilience and that personal resilience that you need?
Sure. Thanks. If it's okay, what I'd like to do just to build, you made some really important points around your yoga practice and that psychological availability, not only for your family and your work, but for yourself. I also want to just share some things that my clients do that might also kind of build and again, part of what Maria and I want to do is give you guys some ideas so you can go, maybe there's an aha here. You know, a lot of my clients, and this is the point about it, doesn't always have to be time consuming. Some of my clients have mantras that they might cite just before they go onto a call. They might journal. Some meditate. Some even deep breathe. And one of the things that I'll show you right here is this rock. I literally just, all I do each time before I coach a client or I go onto a call with a client, I literally just look at that rock for 10 seconds. That's all I do. And that's a way that I can just quickly reset my mind to be completely present for that person. So to Maria's point, there's a lot of different things that you can do, whether it's in the moment or to start your day to kind of get that psychological availability. So the first thing we'd love to have you do in the chats is if you could just share what are some things that work for you that other people can then gain from what you're sharing. So hopefully that can be one of our first chat items that we can talk about at the end of the session. So I just wanted to build on those really important points, but thanks. So back to your question. The second part is it's really simple. It's one word. It's motivation. And and everyone goes, okay, so yeah, that sounds nice. But the one thing that's really interesting and it's really critical in all the psychometrics and evidence-based insight tools that I use either for my coaching or my consulting engagements, there's one thing that comes out of all of those, and that is that performance, whether it's your personal performance or your work performance, is inextricably linked to motivation. And so that's why it's so critical. And the way I'm going to break it down for you, I don't know if you've heard of this author. His name's Daniel Pink. He wrote a book called Drive, the truth about what motivates us. And he said there's really three things, right? It's autonomy, it's mastery, and it's purpose. And what that means is autonomy is about the ability to set your own direction. Mastery is just all of our continuous desire to really get better at what we do. And then the third about purpose is just knowing what we do has meaning. So I want to break some of those down a little bit because the interesting thing about that, so all of the enablers for autonomy, mastery, and purpose, it's really three things. It's rituals, it's standardized processes, and it's frequent personal connection. So, if you think about it in an office space, there's plenty of opportunities to create those three things: the rituals, the standardized processes, and the frequent personal connections. But the question becomes, how do we do that at home? So I'd love to just share some examples of ways that you might recreate that in order to kind of create that motivation in this new normal. So when you think about autonomy and the structure to enable, like, to set your own direction, it's really establishing those remote rituals. One is just show up for work at the same time every day, right? Another word, and the other one is just what Daniel Pink referred to as MIT, M-I-T, which is your most important tasks first. I refer to it as the big rocks, right? Address your big rocks first. And the reason why that's so critical, if you think about it, and we can all relate to this, our days goes like this. We have this peak, and then our mind share troughs, and then we have a little bit of a return, right? So during that first peak, that's when you have not only the most focus, but you're also to be less distracted. That's when your mind is in that position to do both. So the idea of focusing on your most important tasks first, or addressing those big rocks, is really, really critical. The second part of it then is really taking a clean break at the end of the day. And I love this story. I have a client who literally commutes home from her work office. And what she does is she literally, if the weather permits, she walks out of the house, she takes a 15-minute walk just to kind of regroup, just like we all used to do on our car ride, reflect on her day, and then she comes home. So then when she's back at that, what we'll call that second peak of the day, she's able to be in a better frame of mind with her family. And so it's really kind of an interesting concept to say that she actually creates that physical break from the house by commuting home, whether it's a quick 15-minute drive or a walk. So that's just an idea of how you might do it. Or, there may be another ritual, which is just use the same mug every day on your desk. It's starting to create that continuity. So that's some examples of how you could start to create that autonomy in the work environment. When we think about mastery, it's really, if you think about it, it's all about mapping your progress, right? And that really supports our innate desire to really just continuously get better. We can do a raise of hands. We all do something like this: food tracking apps, counting steps. Those are all motivational, in part because why? You're keeping track of your progress and you're seeing that accumulative benefit of that. So that's really the concept. For me, for example, my work rituals, is really, one of them is really archaic. In fact, here, I'll show you. I literally, every week, this is my to-do list for the week, right? I literally just hand write it out: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I also, by the way, draw 3 lines in there: my peak, my trough, and my recovery. And I lay out my week, but the best part of it is I cross stuff off as I go along. I mean, it's so basic, but it's just a really great way to track my progress during the week. Or the other thing I do when we think about mastery is I keep coaching log for all of my clients. And it's not just, I don't just mark down what we discussed during the session and things like that, but I also write what I discovered about my client's experience, and then my own discovery, either about my coaching or what I experienced as a result of their discovery. So that way, then I have a way of mapping my progress of becoming a masterful coach, right? So how might that work for you? Well, one thing for sure is journaling, right? Now, again, that can sound like, oh my God, journaling. It's not so much the quality of the content that you put into that journal. It's just 60 seconds. It's just the act of writing that down and honoring what you achieved during the day. And even honestly, if you don't stick to the calories for the day, or you don't get that exercise in, or you literally just in your journal wrote, I just got through the work day. The point is you're tracking and you're keeping progress of your thing. Now, the other part of that, though, is don't beat yourself up if you don't succeed that day. It's more the act, right? And we'll talk more about how self-compassion comes in there later, in order to give yourself some forgiveness if your day doesn't go quite the way you want. And then the last part of it is around purpose. And connection really solidifies purpose. And what I mean by that is knowing what is meaning to you personally and what gives you that purpose. You know, one thing that's come up a lot, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, I've heard, people are throwing, cocktail hours, in fact, I went to a reunion last night with my colleagues that we used to do in bars that we now did on a virtual session. It's great to connect that way, but it doesn't have the same level of intimacy. So how can you create some intimacy through these types of larger connections? Well, what some of my clients have been doing that's been really effective for them, remember when I said like you have that most important task first part of your day where you're making that commitment to block that time out before you start meetings? Well, do a Zoom session with one of your colleagues. Not a meeting, not a conversation, but just saying, hey, I'm going to be working during this block of time. If you want to Zoom in and work on your stuff at the same time, so we're just sitting side by side on Zoom, that's been really impactful for my clients because it gives them that connection, that short kind of, oh, hey, by the way, what about this or what about that? And it's been really effective. It's just like sitting next to somebody in a cube in your office and you're both just working away. Another thing that's really critical when you think about purpose is, we all can probably look at and say very generally how our projects are actually helping other people, but why not identify one person that a project you're working on and who that's impacting? And then the last thing, we all go to meetings and it's how are we going to do this? When are we going to get this done? But start adding why are we doing this into those conversations. Why are we having this meeting? Why are we doing this work? What are the outcomes and what are the benefits of it? And if you integrate that, those can all be reinforcements of purpose. So Maria, that's my idea around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You've spoken about psychological meaningfulness. I see some real clear links there. Could you speak a minute about that?
Yes, absolutely. But first, Ben, thank you so much. There were so many great tips in that little bit, and I was trying to take mental notes of all that information. One of the things you mentioned as a ritual is mantras. I used to be a person who would be like, ugh, mantras. Like, why do I need a mantra? And as I mentioned,
or by the way, or we all think of this Zen master type of.
Exactly. But I have an 8-year-old daughter. She just turned 8, and about 3 years ago, she taught me a mantra that she had learned at school. And the mantra goes, I am strong, I am bold, my own power I can hold. And
Nice.
when she taught me that, I was like, wow, that's incredible. And since then, I start repeating that mantra to myself when I feel anxiety coming and overcoming me. And I just say in my head, I am strong, I am bold, my own power I can hold. And it's been incredibly powerful. So when you spoke about mantras, that really resonated with me because I used to be a non-believer. And then my very wise daughter, when she was like about 5, got me into the world of mantras. So if anybody's looking for a mantra, that one is a really good one.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. But yeah, psychological meaningfulness is something that we've been thinking a lot about recently. When we think about the dimensions of psychology and how our brain operates, psychological meaningfulness is really what connects us to the why. So as we think about meaningfulness in a corporate setting, in work, is really what is the meaning of our work. And that plays very well into that just last bit that you describe as purpose, right? So autonomy, mastery, purpose. That connection to the why is extremely important. And I think that when things get really hard right now, because our whole world was disrupted by a pandemic, but also sometimes because they get hard because, I don't know, you had a rough day with a colleague, or if you work in sales, you were working on a large deal for a really long time and the deal fell through and you don't know why, and the client is ghosting you, or because you were let go of a job that you love. Like whatever disruption comes in your life, whether it's personal or professional, it is that connection to the why and that meaningfulness that keeps you going. And God knows that things are hard right now. And I think that if I wasn't doing a role that really connects me to a larger why and a larger sense of purpose, I will be having a much, much harder time. So it is really important to develop that understanding of your why. And I really like how you connected that to that sense of purpose. But I think something that is really important that I wanted to mention is that You can only find that why and that psychological meaningfulness if you understand that you also need psychological safety. One cannot exist without the other. These concepts are really interconnected. So take care of yourself first. Find those rituals, find those things that keep you going, and then take the time to journal about your why, or think about it while you're on your walk, or staring at your rock, or tie your mantra to your why. Like anything that will help you connect and remind yourself that you're working for a larger purpose will keep you going.
Yes, exactly. Thanks so much for that. Okay, so what I would love for everybody to do is just take a minute right now and start to capture some of these ideas that would work for you, right? We've thrown a lot out there, but what would work for you, right? You can share them if you like, but what are some things that would help you attain autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? To sustain your motivation. Because once you write it, even if you don't share it in the chat, it'll just give you something to start to reflect on and build on after our session today.
And Ben, while people type that in the chat, one of the things you said at the beginning of the conversation that I kept in the back of my head is empathy. You've spoken a lot about empathy. You've written about empathy, leadership. You gave the example of what happened to you as a leader on the wake of 9/11 and how you wanted to be empathetic, but that's not always easy. So let's talk a little bit more about that for a minute.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you know what? Here's what I would say. And I work on this a lot with clients because, again, they all desire this. In normal times, empathy is absolutely critical to make that connection to your team or to individuals on your team, right? But right now, too much empathy, and this is going to bear with me as I go through this, but could really actually slow down agility. And I'll kind of explain that, right? Part of it too is because we're all going through this. It's not just, you're sitting in your office one day and somebody comes in with kind of some sort of strong negative emotion that you want to then sit with them about. We're all going through something right now. So part of it is if we all just go right into empathy, it might magnify some of our own personal emotions that we're feeling. And then we start to create, some paralysis or lack of agility for both of us. So what I think first now, it's about being really curious. And what I mean by that is, first you're going to be curious, then you're going to show empathy, but then you're going to move to compassion. Okay. So that's why I said, yes, it's important, but the role of it now may be a little bit different. Because this is also highly personal, when I talk about being curious and asking just some open-ended questions about what is it going on and how are you feeling, is then you can begin to understand the emotion that the person's experiencing. And once you have that understanding, you're better able then to really resonate and empathetically sit with them for that moment. Okay. But then again, like I said, right now, if we sit with that too long, it may not be as impactful as we want it to be. So I kind of use the hot stove analogy, right? So that burner is that negative emotion. Yeah, by the way, this isn't about denying it. It's about embracing it, but it's embracing it quickly, just like you might touch a hot stove, but you pull your hand off quickly. You don't sit there with it. Because if you sit there with it, you get stuck. It's your hand, I won't even go into all the downstream impacts of it, but just think about it as a hot stove. Yep, you do it, you recognize you touched it, and then you go on. So as leaders, it's really first about compassion, because compassion is constructive, right? It starts with empathy, but then it moves outward to your intent to help this employee, and then frankly through yourself. Now, that's usually what I say is the easy part, because it's all our natural instinct to help other people. But what we often forget is we forget to turn that mirror onto ourselves. And that's what I mean by this self-compassion, right? When I do that with my clients, when I have a client who's talking about their compassion that they're bringing to one of their team members, their employees, and I ask them, well, what does it feel like to turn that mirror onto yourself? When that lands for them, it's really powerful. It really is transformational and liberating. And just the other day when I did that with one of my clients who was being so compassionate for her team, but there wasn't that self-compassion there. She said, wow, it gives me permission. And I thought that was such a strong word. She goes, thank you for the permission to do that. And of course, what I said is, no, you gave yourself that permission. When we think about self-compassion, there's really, I see it as two parts, right? There's body and there's mind. I want to talk a little bit about the mindfulness aspect of self-compassion. Think about self-compassion as a gift to yourself. And what I mean by that is, when you are coming from a place of self-compassion, it gives you greater emotional resilience. And when you have stronger or greater emotional resilience, you're able then to show up for other people the way you want to. So that's what I mean by it, is kind of an empowering gift to yourself, so that you can give the way you want to give to other people. That's really critical. But to do that is starting to transform a mindset. Sometimes in psychological terms, they call it cognitive reframing, but it's, again, way too late, so we won't go down that path. But what I refer to it is a perspective shift, right? And how do we shift our perspectives? And what I mean by that is, how are you looking at a particular situation? Because the reality is, we can all look at a situation from a different perspective. We're all going to see the same situation completely differently. That makes sense, right? So let's talk some real life examples of what I mean by transforming your mindset or changing your perspectives. And there's one now that we're all facing, and especially now, and it's that word, chores. Home is our workplace, right? And as I mentioned earlier, the boundaries are blurred. So we're even more aware of the chores that we have to do. Or it might be, hey, I need a stack from the fridge. Oh my God, I really should start a load of laundry. Or, I don't have to walk. Do I have to walk the dog now? I think I need to, right? So if we think about reframing that, think about those breaks as rewards. And what I mean by that, and again, this isn't, mind games. It's just, think about it as reward. And here's what I mean by that. After you have a deep focus work session, or you've been in a long meeting, we all have to reset somehow, right? When we were in the office, that was a walk back to our office, right? Just that quick, short walk was a way to reset our clock, right? Stopping by someone's cube and just saying, hey, you want to have lunch, that's a reset. So that's what I mean by starting to reframe some of those chores as your reset after doing some work. So now your reset might be walking the dog. It might be throwing and starting a load of laundry, right? So same idea, different approach in the reality. The other thing too, and it starts to break them down if we look at it differently, focusing on the chores right now, while we're also supposed to be working our day, can be really draining. And it can really cause you to start to lose focus. And if you lose that focus, like I was saying earlier, then you can't be present and show up for the work you want to do or that you have to do. So that's why we can start to perhaps reframe breaks as no longer have tos, but enablers to both personal and professional productivity. You have yourself a better chance of assuring at the end of the workday that you're actually refreshed and energized, right? Or so just because you've redefined the definition of that break in your day. One of my clients calls it her new form of multitasking, right? At work, multitasking was emailing while we were doing this, but now she goes, my multitasking is I start the stew and then I go to my next meeting. So there you go. So that's a reframed view of it. Another thing that my clients do that I absolutely love is they write themselves permission slips. And those permission slips are, I give Maria permission to start the laundry. But then what's important is you add a because statement. Because if I do that, it will save me 10 minutes tonight so that I can spend time with my daughter. So permission slips are a really powerful tool. Sometimes, I shouldn't be saying this, coaching sometimes can be so easy because it's sometimes the simple things that have the greatest impact. Maria, you've been sharing some ideas and things that you've been going through, but I know that you really are balancing a lot right now between family and work and just being in a really, situation of being in Brooklyn right now. How are you balancing all of this, and how are you putting reframing into practice?
Yeah. So I love that you talked about reframing. I learned about reframing by coincidence a few months ago. I think it was through somebody I followed on Instagram, some therapist that I follow on Instagram, and they posted about reframing, and that was kind of my aha moment about it. And so during this crisis, I've been really using reframing strategies. As a Brooklynite, our family used to get takeout probably 3-4 nights per week, and that's not the case right now. So I could have taken an approach where it was like, oh my God, it's a chore, I have to cook. But what I've been telling myself every night as I start cooking is, I am grateful for the food in our table. I'm grateful for this abundance. And that really reframes my attitude towards cooking and serving dinner for my family. And that covers another idea, and it's the idea of thinking things that we're grateful for to really help us just connect with positivity and positive vibes. And then also, rather than saying, oh my God, I have to homeschool and work, I mean, really trying to reframe it as, what a great opportunity to really understand how my daughter learns and to really get insights into how her learning process operates. So that's like reframing, just 2 examples of reframing I've been doing that have been really helpful for me, especially the cooking one. Yeah. But then the other thing too is, you talked about giving permission to yourself. So I've done little things like I've given myself permission to have a glass of white wine every night while I'm cooking dinner. And that's really nice. At the end of the day, I've done my yoga, I've done my chores, I'm cooking dinner. That's kind of the last big chore of the day. And I'm drinking my white wine, and it's really relaxing. So that permission, it's not related to work, but it's permission of something that I look forward to. I look forward to pouring myself that glass of white wine. And then the other thing too is, and I think this is, I tie a lot of things back to yoga these days because it's what I'm doing the most. But another thing that I learned through that practice is that discomfort is only temporary. So if you're holding a pose that's really hard to hold, and you're holding that for like a few seconds, it's really uncomfortable, right? And you don't know if you can do it. But what you learn is that discomfort always passes, that nothing is forever. And as we go through this crisis, I'm reframing that in that way too. Nothing is forever. This will not be forever. Everything is temporary. And even if it's a really long time that we're dealing with COVID-19, it's changing. And that's what you said at the beginning of the conversation. First, it was triage. Then we kind of just tried to recreate normality. And now we're going back to questioning what that normality should look like. So even within the past 8 weeks of that cycle, nothing has been forever. It's constant change. And knowing that helps me get through the day.
Great. Thanks. That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
You've shared so many great pieces of information during this conversation. And I think as we start to wrap up, what are the 2 biggest takeaways that you want people to live with tonight?
Thanks. Can I have 3?
You can have 3, yes.
The hall pass, or your permission slip. And it is both, I give Ben permission to, and include because. It's really a powerful exercise. The second one is define it. You know, we talked about some examples of motivation, but that again is also very personal. So think about what rituals can you create to feel in control of setting your own direction from an autonomy perspective. And what tracking can you do that'll work for you in a way that you can continually improve and celebrate your mastery? And then identify what gives you purpose. And a lot of times that can start with really just taking a few minutes and saying, what are my values? And when I talk about values, I'm not referring to cultural, ethical, or moral values. I'm talking about what defines me as a person and really drives me. And then think about those and think about how that links to the purpose that you create. And then the last thing is experiment, experiment, and experiment. And why I talk about that is an experiment, again, is a form of self-compassion, because when you try an experiment, you reflect on it and you say, well, what really worked for me? You know, and what didn't work that I'd like to do differently next time? Or what do I want to do more of? And perhaps experiment in a way that helps you show up in a way that you want to for your family, your job, but most importantly, you. And the other thing that's really important from a self-compassion point of view, with experiments, there's only learning, there's no pass fail.
I love that. Wow, that is a great takeaway. With experiments, there's only learning, there's no pass fail. I love that. Thank you for that. And for all the takeaways. We're really big on actionable takeaways here at CFW Career, so I appreciate that we're wrapping up with that. And Ali, you've been monitoring the questions, so I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. Thanks again for that conversation. It was really, really great. Some really good key insights and takeaways. Before we jump into the questions, actually, I just wanted to reiterate some of the answers to the 2 questions that were asked during the conversation, because they just had really good responses from everyone. The first, around what works for you in terms of balancing those professional responsibilities and productivity, with that inner peace. A lot of people reiterated yoga and meditation was really helpful, running consistently or taking a walk during the day and breaking up your day with a little bit of physical activity away from a screen. And along with that, other exercises like high impact aerobics and strength training. Brittany had said taking the time to just really make your coffee and giving yourself those few minutes to take care of that. And also taking time to pause and breathe and think about intentions and checking in with yourself, checking in with others away from, the work day and the workload, or, taking 10 seconds to look at your rock before a call. So really good stuff there coming from that. And then in terms of those other forms of self-compassion and reframing and mantras that go with that, this too shall pass and everything is temporary, are really good ones that came up. And of course, Maria, we all loved yours. I am strong, I am bold, my own power I can hold. So let's jump into questions now. We have a couple in the chat. And again, if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat and we'll read through them there. The first is, so managers manage and leaders lead in the context of a company and a corporate culture. And while it sounds like these approaches would work for anyone in any kind of company or work situation, is part of the solution creating a culture that encourages these approaches?
If I understand the question correctly, the answer is yes. And what I mean by that, some of the companies that I actually coach with also, individual contributors are also expected to be leaders, right? And so when we think about leadership in this perspective, or even managers as managers, this is all about innate leadership and how we show up for our colleagues, whether it's a team we manage, whether it's an organization that we oversee, or if we're an individual contributor who's also has an impact on the people that we work with, whether they're our stakeholders, our friends, or our colleagues. I hope that answers the question, but to me, this is really about how we show up at work, and we all have an opportunity to bring leadership into this situation. Maria, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's great.
The next question is, distractedness is the primary way she would describe her COVID mindset. So how are you seeing clients meaningfully battle against the endless distractions? If there's kids at home, periods of deep thought are basically impossible for the near future. So how do you embrace the short work periods and not feel endlessly distracted?
So there's one of the things that there's 2 tools that I use in the coaching that I do that hopefully this might help. One is that concept of, most important things first, or what I refer to as the big rocks, and start to identify what those big rocks are, right? This is from Stephen Covey. So I'll give credit where credit's due, but the concept of the mayo jar, and if you have this mayonnaise jar and it's your work day, if you start filling it up first with gravel and sand, or water, you don't really have room for those big rocks to put in there. So the idea is focus on your big rocks. Now, for one of my clients, when he identified that, he literally stuck Post-its on the top of his desk. And then he started to say, okay, if a meeting request or something comes in and it doesn't fit my big rocks, I have the option of choosing not to do that. So that's one way he's maintaining focus. Another tactic that I use that also seems to be really impactful is to write down what is what is going to be on your performance review. What are the things that you have within your performance review this year? And if the things that sometimes come in as distractions aren't going to have an impact on your performance review, then that's just another way of saying, okay, how can I create some focus and prioritization? It's not to say that you may not look at them, but you just may look at them when you have time or when you can get to them, versus saying, oh, let me just quickly get this off my desk and then go back to my big rocks.
Yeah, that's great. Maria, do you have anything to add to that one?
No, other than I want to start implementing that. I think it's going to be really helpful to start implementing that most important things to do each day. It's going to help me stay more productive.
Great.
I'm going to take a coach's answer to that, which is what's important to you. Again, just like so many of these things, right? What's important to you that you can do that's, for your own self-care, and define that. And even just the discovery of that can be so revealing.
Yeah, that's great.
What I'll add
So
to that,
sorry.
it's the highlight that is personal. I think that's a common theme to this conversation. But one of the things you mentioned, Ben, is the permission slips. And the permission slips are a great idea, but I think what's most important about the permission slip is the second part of it, the why, right? So if you choose to do something around self-care, add that second part to it. I am drinking a glass of wine. Why? Because it helps me relax at the end of the day, or whatever that reason is. Because when these things are so personal, we can also find some consistent themes. And I think that why and that understanding of psychological meaningfulness for every decision that we're making is really powerful.
And I love that. Thank you.
Great. Well, it looks like those are the questions. If we don't have any other questions, I want to thank everyone for joining this conversation around our new norms we're navigating and the balancing acts that are coming along with them. And I hope that you all, as I did, are leaving with some good takeaways and insights tonight from the conversation. Again, a special thanks to Ben for partnering and co-hosting tonight's conversation with us. Ben, can you remind us where we can learn more about your offerings and how we can keep in touch with you?
Sure. You can reach me through my website, which is Sorry, I just got sniffly. coachingworksnyc.com or ben@coachingworksnyc.com.
Great. And lastly, I want to remind everyone of our company and who we are and where you can get in contact with us. We're CFW Careers. It's a recruiting and talent consulting firm that specializes in finding, hiring, and retaining top talent, both through the recruiting process, but also through customized programs for both teams and individuals around employer brand and onboarding processes and D&I initiatives and outplacement and transition services and career coaching. So lots of different offerings there. And please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on our team to learn a little bit more about what we do and how we may be able to support you and your team. And that being said,
a big thanks for the opportunity to collaborate with you guys. It was really fun.
Of course. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So with that, we will let you go. Everyone have a great night and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.